Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Mind Your Nest. I'm your host, Jennifer Rosen, and I'm excited to have my guest in studio this morning. I've known her for over 10 years, which is a really long time. Her name is Megan Kowalski, and she's the managing director and partner for the learner group at Hightower. Hi, Megan.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited you're here. I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation. So I want to tell everybody how I've known Megan. Many years ago, I don't know, a couple of years prior to my dad's passing, as I've talked about before, growing up in my family, we talked about minding your nest, minding your matters, taking care of business, taking care of your family. So one of the components of doing that when your parent is ill and it seems like they might not be around for a long time is having those conversations about what's going to happen when he's no longer here. So I don't know. I was so impressed with you so many years ago. You're incredibly bubbly, so personable, always with a smile on your face. And I just always felt so comfortable and confident after I would leave the office after our meetings. And I don't know, I didn't really know a lot. It was information that I didn't really want to know at the time because that meant that my dad wasn't going to be on the planet anymore. But one of the things that I really loved and appreciated was the environment at the learner group. Back then, Gene Lerner was still alive and he was a trailblazer, and my dad was a trailblazer. And it was that older generation. My dad was 78 when he passed away. But the tone and tenor of the Heckman group of my dad's office was somewhat similar. It was like the patriarch, this strong man leading the top, teaching everybody.
Right.
Old school, the old ways, how business was done many years ago without all the technology and computers and the quickness of everything. I'm looking at the logo, my logo, Mind Your Nest, the cover art, and that's what you do every day. You help people mind their nest eggs, right?
Yep.
So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you decided to get into this business and specifically the learner group?
Yeah. So I am originally from Illinois. I'm a Midwest gal through and through, although now I'm down here in Boca, Florida, and love it here as well. But I think we bond over being Midwest gals because we're just built a little different. But I did not know growing up that I wanted to be a wealth advisor. That was not something that was, you want to grow up and be a firefighter. It just wasn't the natural thing I thought of growing up. It wasn't until college that I really discovered this line of work. I always knew I loved numbers. So I always thought maybe something in finance. That was my major, but I didn't really know exactly what. I ended up taking a portfolio management class in my undergrad with Professor Bateman. Shout out, he's the best. And that's where I discovered wealth management in general, the concept of you're helping people manage their wealth, their finances for them personally. You're not managing like a company's finances, which just feels a little bit impersonal. I had a couple internships growing up, one in accounting, and I just knew I needed a lot more interaction with people. I'm a very people-oriented person, although I happen to also really love numbers and that. So I thought that would be a great fit. Because of that, I wanted to explore an internship in wealth management to see what it was all about. And I interviewed at a lot of places, a lot of big firms I was very excited about. But one of them was definitely the learner group. This was one that I really wanted, but I also didn't. I went to school in Chicago, and the learner group's office is in Deerfield, Illinois. Anyone from the Midwest knows it's about a 45 to an hour minute drive. It's great, but when you're going to school, and I also had a side job at the time, it was just a lot to juggle. However, I really did like the learner group because I wanted to learn from Gene Lerner himself. He has since passed, but he had so much knowledge, so much experience, and he had relationships to people like Alan Greenspan, Milton Friedman, and it just seemed like I would be able to live through some of these economic figures that I've learned about more one-on-one. I ended up getting the job.
Did you interview with Gene?
No, not at the time, although I did meet him during my interviews, but I didn't interview directly with him. And Gene, we'll get a little bit more into him probably. But so I worked with them throughout while I was still in college. And then when I ended up graduating, I stayed on full-time and turned into a full-time position with them. Back then, the firm was a lot different than I would say what it is today, in that it was a lot more old school at the time. And not in a negative sense, but I think the whole industry, if you're thinking 10 years ago, 10 years is a lot of time.
Yeah.
And especially in that type of industry, which was one of the last ones holding out to be just a little bit more old school, male oriented or dominated. And it was a lot like that, although not so much. We already had probably 30% women on our direct team at the time. But it definitely was. He was a legend. I'm so privileged to be able to have studied under him. He had some of the most hilarious one-liners that will live on forever. Some of them are definitely not appropriate to share on the podcast today, but he was just a gem. And then I got to meet and work alongside so many other peers and mentors on the team that had as much knowledge as he did, just without that extensive background. So that's how I started in this industry. I'm so grateful for where it led me because I would have never thought that was the path. Growing up, I was focused on wanting to be a mom. That was my biggest goal ever that I wanted to achieve. Not that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom either,
Right.
but I just wasn't as concerned about what my career was going to be because it was going to be the afterthought. And my main focus was being a mom,
Right.
working mom.
Yep. No, that's a wonderful way of putting it. It didn't really matter what you were doing to earn a living.
Mm-hmm.
The other part was this feeling like in your gut.
Yeah. I grew up in a wonderful home. My parents were both working class. They were very family oriented, came from very large families. So just family was always one of my biggest priorities. And that's what I always knew I wanted to maintain. And I just didn't really grow up in that entrepreneurial or very driven career focused environment. Although some would argue my career has led to that now, naturally.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my focus growing up or even as it unfolded.
That's interesting that you say that because I grew up as in 3 very strong males in my house. My dad was the patriarch, worked long as I can remember. Both my brothers worked, very successful. And I remember my dad saying one time at the dinner table that him and my mom would get us through college. And that was their gift to us. And then everything after that, we were on the hook for. And he said something like, if you decide to be a bum after we make sure that you're through college, then that's on you. Then you're going to have to figure out how to pay your bills. And it was just that mentality that if you want to be a bum, go ahead and be a bum, but you're not going to knock on my door for help if you decide to go that route. It is interesting, you talking about growing up in such a family-centric environment. I would say that that was the same for me, but different. We had a very small family, no first cousins. Just your experience being surrounded by family all the time, and what you do, you're surrounded by families all the time. So can we talk a little bit about your initial experience with being submerged now in the family dynamics at the learner group? It's not like you have to know how to talk to people. That for you and for me, that's really an innate part of who we are. We're people. However, talking with people regarding finances can be somewhat challenging. So did you have somebody that guided you before you started taking meetings on your own? Were you part of meetings and you were just absorbing the content and the conversation and kind of watching how the different family members were interacting? And also, one of the first meetings, if you can recall, was it just the patriarchal level of family and that was it?
Good questions. I would say our team has been an evolution. When I started, the business was primarily probably still meeting with just the matriarch and patriarch within that environment at the time. That wasn't abnormal. Not a lot of companies were meeting with the full family. I think it was actually integrating younger generations like me and some of the other partners and some of the other team members that propelled a little bit more of trying to engage with all of the different ages. We've obviously seen situations where next generations, whether the next generation was 65 or the next generation was 25, just not feeling ready, comfortable, confident in what was set upon them if they had their parents pass away. So it was really just working through a couple of those situations with families over the years. I started on the operations side of the
Hmm.
business and a little bit on the trading side and migrated to the advising side later in my career. But I would say I had enough interaction with families, whether I was advising them or working through the logistics of what has to happen in those transitions, that I got to know them well enough before I transitioned over to meeting with them in a formal advising setting. I think some of my first meetings were with actually the second generation because I had already been there for some time where the first generation was no longer around. And yeah, I think I also got mentorship. So one of our managing partners is Jared Gondek. He's very innovative, very entrepreneurial, and he really challenged us also to think outside of the box. How can we just help families better suit their needs? Like regardless of how it's always been done, what can we do differently that will just help them at the end of the day? I think it's just taking those mindsets and with people, there's a couple different factors. One is talking about finances. Some people clam up just thinking about that, period.
Yep.
It could be based on age, based on gender. That's a whole nother thing, but just finances can intimidate people. So bringing it down to let's just remove the intimidation. It doesn't need to be, this is your wealth, not mine that we're talking about. So let's help you get comfortable with what is this? What does it mean to you? What are different aspects of it that we need to help you understand over time so that what's going to go into the decisions that you'll make over the course of your life with them. The next is, I would say, working with different personalities. So some people really want to go in the weeds on investments. Some people want to try to get maybe the bare minimum. And let's talk about planning and other items. So I think it's just being an active listener and recognizing how best you can help them and meeting whoever it is at where they're at, and then helping bring them from where they are to where they want to go.
What do you recall about the first time when you switched to the advisor role, when you had multiple generations in a room together? I'm presuming that you already knew what the matriarch and patriarch wanted. And was it a collaborative conversation where you were part of the conversation, or was it a conversation where you started off talking on behalf of the matriarch and patriarch and laying the table, and then that brought on conversation between everybody that was sitting in those chairs?
So I think we're playing more of the quarterback or the MC of the situation
Hmm.
because, again, in many situations, the decision making, at least at first, is coming from the matriarch and patriarch. What do you have in place? How much are you comfortable sharing? What do you want to help the next generations with? And that's just our starting base. Depends. Every family is totally different, and we just customize it based on what they would like. And then from a control aspect, some generations, they want to make all the decisions, and that's totally fine. But it's just figuring out where they want to go with it and letting them guide the conversation. And then we're just there to help facilitate it and to teach along the way with new concepts to different audiences.
Have you had an experience where one of the younger generations had a problem, was frustrated, was emotionally, I don't want to say distraught, but was surprised in a negative way once the conversation started coming?
Yes, I would say it's important to remember all of the wealth that each person has accumulated. They can decide what they want to do with it. It's their decision. So there's this concept of fair versus equal.
Hmm.
And so fair, equal being, let's say you have 3 kids and you divide it 1/3 each child. Fair being maybe you have one of them that makes a little bit less, the other 2 are very successful. So you want to give that person a little bit more. Whatever the matriarch and patriarch decide is their decision. It's not really up to anyone else. So First, it's figuring out what does that look like. I think the really important part is communicating that before something were to happen. I've seen families where they're too uncomfortable to have that conversation with the next generation. They just leave it up to the estate paperwork to show everyone what's going to happen. And then you have siblings having animosity between each other, thinking they somehow had something to do if it's not equal distribution or something like that. I'd say one of the most important things that I could advise to any family with resources, especially multi-generational families, is just communicate. Open, honest communication early so that everyone just knows what to expect. Sometimes the not knowing brings on angst within family members. So just provide clarity, provide your reasoning. It's your reasoning at the end of the day, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just the communication, I think, is really key.
Did you find that as you started getting more familiar and more comfortable, as you said, as you took on JR's infusion of this mindset and where he wanted to steer the ship, that those conversations or those interactions became easier?
I would say yes and no. So easier because we're able to engage with the rest of the family much more often, regularly. So from that aspect, yes, but there are so many different family dynamics to navigate between just relationships between siblings, levels of understanding, types of communication they prefer. There's many aspects that go into it. So I think it's just recognizing what each party needs, wants, how they communicate, recognizing the interfamily relationships and not interfering with them, because the last thing you want to do no harm. We don't want to disrupt any family dynamics. We are just helping facilitate really what's in place and helping each generation grow, not just a lot of wealth is lost generation to generation. So they say from the first and second generation, it's about 75%.
Oh, wow.
And then from the second to third, there's only 90% of the original wealth is lost. So we're really trying to focus on helping families move that wealth over time much further. A lot of that is communication. A lot of that is building confidence and the right skill set within the generations to not only use those resources, but use them to propel them into something even more and help that grow.
Have you had experience where once the matriarch and patriarch were gone and then the money gets funneled down, has there ever been an experience where that next generation wants to do something in a more giving way and keep, I don't know, X percentage of that inheritance and then take a specific percent to give or set up donor advised funds so that they're giving over time? Has there ever been dissension between that next generation of family that says, no, that's not my belief, I don't want to do that? And how does that get resolved? Or does it really get resolved before the inheritance is in motion from the matriarch and patriarch's perspective?
So do you mean that when the matriarch and patriarch pass, they fund a portion of charities?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So again, yes, early communication, they can share their opinions with their parents and see if that changes anything, if they were against it. But at the end of the day, it's really their decision and what they want to do with it. Some parents feel that resources can be a hindrance to motivation and growth for their kids. And we've definitely seen that play out in many scenarios as well. So I think it's important to have balance and just basically preparation and then just open communication. And it's not that they will be able to sway their decisions maybe, but at least it's out there. And yeah, unfortunately, there's not much the second generation necessarily can do. It's once the wealth is in their hands, then they're in the driving seat and they can decide what they want to do for their estate. So I think it's just communicating really between generations still so you can plan for your nest. If there is resources coming down into your nest from your parents, knowing, okay, that part of my nest is taken care of. I can focus on this. And I want to prepare this for my next generation. So the communication just helps even within your own. And it's not necessarily to sway decision making, it's to prepare for your own nest, I would say.
What has been your experience with the younger generation of are aware who know what may or may not be coming their way and who, number one, might not be mature enough to even completely understand what that means? From a basic understanding, yes, you know that there's going to be a huge influx, but the maturity, I would imagine, of that understanding can be different for anybody based
Mm-hmm.
on where that individual is in their life, what kind of person they are. Have they had difficulties in the past? Do they spend every dollar as fast as it comes into the door? How do you help those families either directly and encouraging them to talk about a savings mindset if they're not the right person to do that because they're so close? Parents sometimes they do their best guiding their children, but sometimes the best guides are those objective people that really have no emotional connection to that person,
Mm-hmm.
and they can really be that teacher. So talk to me about that. I know you and I personally have talked about a savings mindset. My own personal experience, that's really how it always was growing up. And truth be told, I probably wasn't the best. I was one of those, a girl in between two brothers, and always needed another pair of black pants or a pair of black shoes. Or I don't know if I've bought and sold so many couches. I don't know why. I just never took the right friend couch shopping with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe in paying yourself first. That's really important. And building. I I'm not somebody who really lives with regret. However, I do wish that at times, like I did my dad's teachings, better justice
Mm-hmm.
by really thinking and being thoughtful before spending or buying. And I joke that I'll probably have to work until I'm 200. But has that been that teaching a savings mindset? Is that a comfortable conversation for you to have?
Definitely. I think there's a couple things that go into it. I'm a millennial. I would say for anyone around my generation, a little bit younger, a little bit older, it's hard to forecast that far out. And I know exactly what you're saying. My parents, and they always taught a savings mentality, but it's just different when your parents tell you to do something than maybe one of your peers who is successful and doing it well and teaching you. Then you're like, oh, I want to be like them. How can I get there? Whereas your parents, it feels like a chore. How would they know? They have different. So I think just that dynamic change helps just absorb a little bit more information for those generations. The other thing I try to help people understand is we're in a very comparative society right now that's very different than 15 years ago, even. So if you're on social media, you're comparing what does this person's living room look like? What are their kids wearing? How big is their ring? There's so much comparing nowadays. And just getting out of that mindset and being comfortable with who you are and what you have, first and foremost. If you can't get out of that mindset on social media, then you probably just need to give social media a little bit of a break because you're never going to be able to keep up with your neighbor. The old phrase was keeping up with the Joneses,
Yeah.
but now the Joneses are all over the internet and they're Jonesier than ever.
Yeah.
And a lot of that to keep in mind is they might be renting that house or that might not be a diamond. And I'm not knocking any of this. I'm just saying what's on social media is not necessarily reality. And it is really important to remind yourself of that because you can get lost in thinking, how am I not keeping up? I'm working so hard. I'm bringing home this money. How is it not happening? I think just helping that generation reflect on that concept and really focus on where do you want to go and what do you want to do? Let's talk about you. Let's focus on you and try to get past that mental barrier. Once you're there, what you said earlier, pay yourself first. That's my biggest thing. Your first expense out of any of them. Before you're paying your rent, your mortgage, the light, you should be paying yourself, whether that's your investment account, your savings account. You need to be budgeting in a monthly investment goal. Otherwise, you're never going to be able to grow unless you have significant resources that are being passed down to you. So it's really important to get through that mindset and pay yourself first. And when you're first starting out, you're like, I'm making no money. I have these crazy bills.
Right.
What are you talking about, Megan?
I don't have money to pay myself first.
And that's where it's getting into the muscle memory of it. It does not matter if you're saving $5,000 a month. It matters if you're saving a month. Put $10 away, put $50 away, put $100 away. Whatever that number is, just start somewhere. That way you already know you have that monthly thing set aside. And then when you're having your touch points with your advisor, every year as your income grows, that will grow and you'll start seeing an account and you'll start following the market. It just starts from something. And it's really just getting into that discipline. Successful investors, it's really about building a discipline, about a savings cadence like that, and some behavioral aspects, just sticking through some market turbulations where you might not want to. It feels very uncomfortable. Your portfolio is selling off, but a lot of it is normal. So it's working with advisors to help coach you through those moments and just staying disciplined about it.
Speaking of the market, I've never paid attention. I see people that are looking all the time. Over the years, they talk about it all the time. I do my best not to pay attention because, to be honest, I don't even know what it really means. I know when I first started working and saving and contributing to retirement plans, I would pay attention for a minute and had some awareness for when the stock split. But I wasn't married to making sure that I was on top of it all the time because, I don't know, I find it somewhat stressful and I don't have control over it anyway. So why am I paying attention? But that's not to say that I haven't been aware of crashes or watching movies that documented crashes or the bubble or any of that stuff, even as recently as this week. When you read or catch a headline that talks about the biggest crash is coming 2024, I would imagine that you do have a percent of your clients that do get stressed out or do watch or do look at their portfolio on the daily. How do you calm those fears and that stress for those clients that are so afraid of what may or may not happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it is coaching through historical events that have previously happened. Okay, let's talk this through. If this happens, how did the last one go? What took place? What's going to be the worst of it? How can we recover? And just verbalizing that a little bit. But it's really important to understand that if, let's say there's a big market sell-off and you get really uncomfortable, you want to sell everything, you're really locking in that low watermark of losses. And typically recoveries can happen very quick sometimes. They can take a while sometimes. But if you're not invested in the market, then you're going to miss out on that recovery and you just absorb that loss. Whereas those investors who wrote it out, they oftentimes are going to end up much higher than they even were before the loss just because they stayed invested. So it's not about not rebalancing. A lot of times we like to rebalance a little bit between different asset classes to reduce the risk overall, but to stay invested and at least to get different returns over periods of time. But I think it's really just talking through it. I can say from experience, we have investors who get very uncomfortable when the market starts getting choppy and they want to sell 50% or sell out. And it's really those investors who never will be able to catch up with everyone else. They significantly reduce their portfolio and impact. And it's not that I don't encourage people to follow their portfolios and look along, but it's to educate and learn and stay ahead of, oh, hey, Megan, I saw this company. What do you think about it? I don't see it in the portfolio yet. Do you guys think it will have an impact? And not necessarily about what's going to happen if there's a sell-off, because there's just a lot of damage you can do listening to your emotions throughout those periods.
We're in an election year, and you've been in this business for a few of those. Does the temperature of the market different during these times compared to non-election years?
Yeah, typically, actually, in the year leading up to an election, the market is historically positive in the year leading up to an election. So a lot of people, when there's volatile periods that people are projecting ahead, they get nervous, they want to get out, but you're actually missing out on a lot of that growth for that period. And then depending on what party gets elected, but then also between the Senate and the House, there's different historical returns for either like a balance overall between Democrats and Republicans, between different parties, or all Republican, all Democrat. So it really just depends on how everything shakes out. And historically, almost all of them are positive. So I think a lot of times, again, people can make very emotional decisions depending on what party they think is going to take over. And it's just important to remember that historically, most of the market is going to be positive in the year leading up. So not to overcorrect too much. Again, we can reallocate a little bit to reduce risk just to make sure everyone's comfortable, but it's just not overreacting to different periods of time, because in the scheme of things, it's really just a small period of time, even though it feels so big right now.
Right.
And it will all balance out long term.
That's a great answer, really. There's so much, it seems like there's so much chaos and unknown in the world, but I would say that's how it is the majority of time.
Yeah.
We only know
Definitely would
what,
have said that the past couple years.
yeah, like we only know what we're able to control in our own personal life. I think the reason why I don't really watch the news or pay attention to a lot of things, I just try to get up and take care of what I need to do on a daily basis. I wanted to ask you, for the younger generations, when they have their first meeting with you without the other family members,
Mhm.
how do you really get to know what they're all about in terms of their risk analysis, what their short and long-term goals are? There's so many questionnaires that will say, where are you in the range of tolerance and risk?
Mhm.
So how do you find that out?
So getting to know someone first and foremost, obviously trying to understand what are their interests, what do they like to do, spending their time, all of that. But when it comes to markets, again, a lot of them might not have a lot of basis foundation starting. So first, it's inquisitive questions, trying to figure out where their level of understanding is starting. A lot of them will pick up some stuff in school. It's just gauging that. And then from a risk tolerance perspective, to your point, many of them might not have portfolios yet. So they might not have a real understanding of what is risk tolerance.
Right. They'd be happy with like maybe a 2% increase or something like that and
Right.
go
And
on
they're
their way.
behind inflation. I think there's important understanding for younger generations. And one of them could be if they are used to very quick wins. So
Mhm.
everything is instantaneous. They have Google. They can know anything in a matter of seconds, especially for investing. I think it's walking through the concept that it's more of a long-term game, and you're not going to be the one to buy a certain stock and it's going to jump up 30% the next day. Yes, you could have some of that throughout your portfolio throughout the course of your investment career, but that's not going to be every single day over day normal. It's not sustainable. And if anyone has that, I would love to meet them right away, because we will
Right.
all invest with you. But it's more just long term and understanding that it's not as instantaneous as they're used to with everything else in their life, and getting around that. And then risk tolerance, I think it's just storytelling and thinking of different scenarios and just thinking through their current situation. Okay, you're 25, you're living in the city, your rent is this, you have this. Let's say this portfolio starts at a certain amount and is 50% by the end of the week. Like, how does that make you feel? I heard an analogy once from someone, and they associated risk to a skyscraper. So if you're living in a building, and just knowing if you're closer to the ground floor and let's say there's a fire, you can get out fast. That's low risk. If you want the view of the lake and you want the penthouse, you can have that. But you're going to take on more risk because if there's a fire, it's going to take you a while to get out. So just thinking of different stories like that that help explain risk tolerance over time until they start to experience it themselves, I think just helps give a level of understanding.
I love that analogy. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah.
And it reminds me why I don't think I'll ever live in a high rise again.
No.
I actually like parking and walking straight to my door, my cute little house.
Always talk about that. I lived
Yeah.
in the city throughout my undergrad and for about 5 years after, and I am not a city gal. No knock on city gals, but
Right.
I love driving to the grocery store,
Right, exactly.
parking my car.
Same. Yeah.
Yep, I'm the same way.
Yeah. No, I'm old school. Seriously. I remember when my parents split up and my dad moved to Fort Sheridan, and I think it was a 7-story condo building, and he lived on the 6th floor because he's afraid of heights. So he said that the 6th floor was as high as he wanted to go.
Oh.
So I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it, as well as when we were driving Route 1 in California. We were driving on that windy road or whatever and looking over the overhang. It was pretty scary. So
Mhm.
I always like staying close to the ground. I think I don't know, it makes me feel better knowing that I can run to my car sooner than a lot of other people can.
Yeah.
How would you talk to incoming advisors about sharing what you shared this morning? And some advisors, I don't know, I guess sometimes you think of Trading Places and all the movies that have portrayed wealth advisors or traders over the years.
Mhm.
It looks so cool and fun and fast and crazy. I remember working out of 30 South Wacker where the Mercantile Exchange was. I mean, it was nuts,
Mhm.
absolutely bananas. So I don't think that your industry is like that anymore, but I wanted to know for the younger generation that wants to be an advisor, do you have some tips, some helpful tips, some recommendations, and how you would guide them coming into this industry?
Definitely. So I'd say before you even are looking for internships or jobs, start investing. However big it is, it does not matter what you're starting with. Start investing and start following the markets yourself. The fastest way to learn anything is yourself. And actually, I would say one of my biggest life lessons ever is fail fast. Find opportunities to fail because you learn so much more when you fail
Right.
than when you're successful. And that's the quickest way to get to long-term success is just failing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start an investment portfolio immediately. And then if you're in college still, try to find a portfolio management class or something that touches this space a little bit just to see what it's more about. And find internships, and more than one if you have time, just because each different firm operates so differently. You might have an internship with a firm and you're just like, this is not for me. This environment, I don't feel comfortable. But you could go to a different wealth management firm and it's the complete opposite. So don't get discouraged. Try it out. Try more than one if you can help it. And then see what it is. And there's a lot of people that have transitioned to advising much later in their career. And that has worked really well for them too. So I would say it's never too late. Just if this is your passion and you love following the markets and you love people, you can make anything else happen. Find mentors in this space if you can. Do research whenever you can and just let it guide you as your passion.
I think this is my last question. You had talked about Gene and Milton Friedman, the really, I don't know, I wouldn't say that they were the fathers or the patriarchs of the movement, but definitely incredible mentors going back to the basics and old school methodologies. Who do you feel today are mentors in the newer generation?
For me personally, or
Yeah.
just in the space?
Yep.
So for me personally, J.R. Gondek, who's one of my partners, is definitely has always been one of my mentors from day one. He was the one who strongly encouraged me to fail fast. And I remember when he first told me that, I was in operations and I was like, that's the opposite of what I should do. So that's scary.
Right. Did you know what he meant when he said that?
Yeah, he meant just try it out, figure it out. If it doesn't work, we'll talk through why and get there. And it works and it starts working quickly because as soon as you mess up, you know how it will not happen again. You just learn. So I would say he's definitely one of my biggest mentors in this space. And then I have just so many other mentors in my life that have given me different, even career advice, but just general advice that will always sit with me and help give me confidence in different situations. My grandma has since passed, but she was one of the not scariest, but she was intimidating growing up. So she was a labor and delivery nurse.
Oh, wow.
And I just always thought she was basically God to me. She could do no wrong. She was the smartest woman I knew, and she commanded a room of anyone. And that was back then, that was whenever. She always had that presence. And I really was intimidated, but admired it. And I wanted to be like her. I definitely didn't want to do labor and delivery because I can't really do the sight of blood. I'm very queasy. But I just wanted to have her confidence and be a guide for other generations. So she was always one that I pulled my confidence from, I would say, over time.
And you're a mom now, so you've definitely had good teachers along the way, good mentors. How do you feel all of that knowledge from looking back at your life has helped you now that you have children of your own?
Yeah, that has been a life changer for sure.
It usually is. I think that's the point.
Yes. No, I think I've learned more from once I became a mom. I have a 2 and a 1-year-old. But it's cool because you see the world through a totally different lens. And I want to encourage them to fail fast and just to learn and be able to be kids for a while because you have the opportunity to be an adult for a very long time.
Yep.
So don't take life too seriously, but just really trying to instill confidence because that you can spread across any career, anything you want to do with your life. But that's really a foundational characteristic that you can't go wrong with.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm so grateful for how I was raised and for the foundation that my parents built all those years ago. And I know that they did that because of their own experience, good, bad, or indifferent. And I know what an impact that has had on my life through good times and bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important, I think, knowing that you are loved and that you matter and that you're able to reciprocate that. If you have that, even on your worst days, it makes it a little easier to get out of bed every day. So
sure.
I think it's wonderful. I was somebody that never really thought about getting married and having kids when I was growing up. And even though my marriage didn't last, I think being a mom is probably the most extraordinary thing that I've ever done in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really elevated me more than I can ever imagine. So I definitely know how my dad felt about being a dad before he passed, that it was his greatest blessing.
Mm-hmm.
I think if anyone's on the fence about having kids, I say just do it. There's no manual. You just have to suffer through it just like the rest of us.
Definitely. And there are some scary times. I have a 2 and 1-year-old, reminder. But I also think it's just remembering everything is temporary. This time is temporary. I might be stressed out of my mind on 3 hours of sleep, but I'm going to miss this phase and I'll never get it back. And then they're going to grow up and be little adults.
That's right.
And
That's right.
I'll miss it.
And they might be taller than you, like me.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't take much. I'm 5'3". Thank you.
Thanks
I've been a fan of yours for a real long time, and this is great.
Well, thanks for having me. I've been a fan of yours too. Those who don't know Jen, meet her. She's literally I would call you my social butterfly. You're just an effervescent soul.
Thank you. My mom did say that she wasn't worried about me moving to Florida. She said that I can make friends at the table, and she knew I would be just fine. So far, it's worked out for me.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for coming along and listening to this episode. I hope everybody has a great day. Until next time.